All right, welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today because we're going to unpack a completely fascinating, kind of hidden biological chain reaction that happens inside our bodies when we decide to eat late at night. We're going to dig into the exact mechanisms of how meal timing affects literally everything from our weight to our sleep, and most importantly, we're going to look at the actual science of how to safely fix it.
Have you ever been jolted awake by a sudden, sharp burning in your chest? Or, maybe you found yourself coughing inexplicably in the middle of the night. It's a really visceral experience and, honestly, super relatable for a lot of us. But it sets up this totally crazy paradox. How is it that a comforting midnight snack can actually trigger unseen biological chaos while we're just trying to sleep? Okay, let's dive straight into Chapter 1, The Midnight Snack Paradox. I want you to think of the human digestive system not just as a furnace where we blindly dump fuel, but as a delicate, incredibly precise clockwork mechanism. And just like any complex set of gears, that mechanism absolutely jams up when you drop a heavy load into it at the exact wrong hour. We call this the domino effect. Basically, one late meal knocks over a whole series of biological dominoes that echo throughout your entire body. To really grasp why this happens, we have to look at a growing scientific field called chrononutrition. Chrononutrition essentially examines how our eating patterns interact with our natural circadian rhythms. See, our bodies literally run on a strict 24-hour cycle. We've got a master central clock in the brain, specifically the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is set by light. But we also have peripheral clocks in our metabolic tissues, like the liver and the gut. And here is the absolute kicker. While light sets your brain's clock, your feeding schedule acts as the main synchronizer for those peripheral clocks.
Which brings us right to Chapter 2, Your Body's Internal Clock.
So, what actually happens when we force our body's night shift to do daytime work? Well, you're essentially sending a blaring wake-up signal to your digestive organs right when your brain is screaming at them to shut down and repair. During the day, our metabolism is primed. We have peak insulin sensitivity, highly efficient glucose tolerance, and high energy burning. Your body is totally ready to use calories for fuel. But at night, it's a completely different story. Your stomach emptying slows way down, insulin levels run higher and way less efficiently, and your body actually flips a switch straight toward increased fat storage. So when you eat late at night, that food is processed inefficiently and stored as fat, rather than being burned off as energy.
And if you need clinical proof of this, get a load of this shocking finding from a Harvard Medical School study of 16 overweight young adults. The researchers compared eating early in the day versus late in the day, keeping calories and physical activity exactly the same. They found that eating late literally decreased leptin, which is your appetite-reducing hormone. But it gets crazier. It actually changed the activity of the genes that control the burning and storage of fat. Think about that. You aren't just storing more fat, you're actively altering your genetic fat storage activity just by changing the time on the clock. Wild, right?
We can actually map out the biological timeline of this disruption thanks to a study on Worcester rats from the journal Molecular Nutrition and Food Research. When late-night feeding begins at hour zero, like say skipping dinner for a huge midnight meal, within just one single hour, hepatic lipid accumulation starts, which is really just a fancy way of saying fat starts building up in the liver. By hour 4, there is a complete massive 4-hour phase delay in the peripheral tissue clock genes. This temporal mismatch leads directly to systemic inflammation and microbial dysbiosis, meaning a really unhealthy imbalance of bacteria in your gut. Your whole system just gets completely thrown out of whack.
All right, let's shift gears from metabolic disruption to the physical theft of our sleep in Chapter 3, Acid Reflux and Stolen Sleep.
Because beyond metabolism, there is a purely mechanical issue that happens when we eat and then immediately lie down, which often shows up as gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD. Let's walk through exactly why symptoms like heartburn and regurgitation get dramatically worse when we hit the pillow. First off, gravity simply fails to keep stomach acid down in the bowl of your stomach. You're lying flat, so the acid just pools. Second, the pressure in your upper esophageal sphincter actually decreases when you sleep, acting kind of like a loose lid on a shaker bottle. Third, your saliva production drops, meaning you have way less natural antacid to neutralize any escaping acid. And fourth, your swallowing reflex essentially stops, which totally slows down the clearance of any acid that does manage to escape.
And this mechanical failure is a massive problem. In fact, up to 25% of GERD patients frequently experience significant sleep disturbances. It creates this brutal negative feedback loop. Nighttime reflux disrupts your sleep, and then chronic sleep deprivation makes your GERD symptoms even worse the very next day. Over time, this can lead to severe, cascading complications, from sleep apnea to actual cellular damage like Barrett's esophagus.
So, the crucial point here is we need actionable ways to fix this. Let's look at some highly effective sleep strategies straight from the clinical data. The absolute gold standard is to avoid eating 2 to 3 hours before bed. Just give your body time to process. You can also raise the head of your bed 6 to 8 inches to recruit gravity back to your team. But here is one of the most fascinating physiological hacks: sleep on your left side. Because of the asymmetrical, kind of curved shape of your stomach, lying on your left side positions the gastric pouch downward, physically blocking acid from rising up into the esophagus. It's literally like a built-in trapdoor. And of course, maintaining a healthy weight and avoiding tight clothing really helps reduce that upward abdominal pressure.
Now let's pivot from the problem to some tasty solutions in Chapter 4, Snacks for Better Sleep. Because, look, what if you are just genuinely, stomach-growlingly hungry at night? I want to assure you that not all late-night eating is a disaster, as long as you know exactly what biological compounds you're putting into your system. There's a pretty clear map here. On one hand, you have known GERD and sleep disruptors: spicy dishes, mint, citrus, caffeine, alcohol, soda, and yes, sadly, chocolate. I know, it hurts. These either relax that esophageal sphincter or just straight up stimulate your nervous system. But on the other hand, you have foods you can actually enjoy: tart cherries, walnuts, warm milk, kiwi, and bananas. These aren't just random generic healthy foods. They're on the list because they contain highly specific sleep-promoting nutrients.
Now, what's really interesting here is the hidden chemistry of these specific snacks. Warm milk, for instance, contains an amino acid called tryptophan. Your body uses tryptophan to produce serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that regulates sleep. Tart cherries and walnuts, they are absolutely packed with natural melatonin. Bananas bring heavy hitters like magnesium and potassium, which act as natural muscle relaxants, easing the physical tension in your body so you can finally drift off.
The type of carbohydrate you choose is also super critical. High glycemic carbs, think sugary snacks or white bread, are going to spike your blood sugar. That creates a wakeful effect and often leads to middle-of-the-night awakenings when that blood sugar eventually crashes. Conversely, a small portion of low glycemic carbs, like some whole grain crackers, promotes serotonin release and creates a really deep, relaxing effect without the crazy metabolic roller coaster.
Okay, we have covered a lot of fascinating rules for our metabolism, but I need to introduce a vital psychological twist here. Welcome to Chapter 5, The Danger of Obsession.
We really need to slow down for a second and talk about the hidden dangers of taking these dietary rules, meal timings, and health perfectionism way too far. Because taking it too far can lead to a condition called orthorexia nervosa. This is an obsessive fixation on eating foods perceived as pure, healthy, or clean. And I want to be explicitly clear here. Unlike anorexia or bulimia, orthorexia is not driven by a desire for thinness. Not at all. It is driven by an intense need for dietary purity, safety, and control. It's what happens when the desire to be optimally healthy paradoxically turns into an actual illness.
And honestly, this is way more common than you might think. This dangerous obsession is estimated to affect up to 7% of the general population. And notably, the rates are even higher among athletes, healthcare professionals, and members of the wellness community. Basically, people who are deeply immersed in health data, much like the chrononutrition data we literally just explored together.
Let's move through this and see how this builds, because what starts as a totally healthy intention can morph into severe warning signs. It usually begins with eliminating entire food groups. Then it escalates into intense anxiety over quote-unquote forbidden foods. People might start judging others' food choices, and eventually they start declining social invitations, like dinner out with friends, simply because they can't control the ingredients in the kitchen. Ironically, the rigid, unyielding pursuit of physical health leads to physical malnutrition, hair loss, and deep, deep social isolation.
To really highlight the emotional toll this takes, I want to share this incredibly powerful quote from Sela House. They say, "The obsession with healthy eating can quietly consume the joy and connection that make life meaningful." It's such a vital reminder. Yes, eating a huge meal right before bed disrupts your peripheral clocks. We know the science. But the immense chronic stress, anxiety, and isolation caused by rigidly enforcing food rules, that can often be far more biologically and emotionally damaging than just having a late-night cookie with your family.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer. I want to leave you with this final, hopefully memorable question to ponder tonight. Are your food rules serving your health, or is your health serving your food rules? True wellness is really about finding that delicate, necessary balance between metabolic awareness and avoiding dangerous dietary obsession. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack the fascinating science of chrononutrition. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next explainer.